The person staring back at you in the mirror might not be the only version of you doing that right now. It's 3 in the morning. The fluorescent light flickers above your bathroom sink, casting harsh shadows across your face. You lean closer to the glass, studying the familiar stranger that mimics your every movement. Your eyes trace the same lines you've memorized, the same imperfections you've cataloged. But what if this reflection isn't as unique as you think? What if, somewhere in the vast darkness beyond your bedroom window, another you is standing before another mirror, having this exact same thought? The question seems absurd, narcissistic even. Yet it emerges from one of the most profound implications of modern cosmology, a mathematical certainty so startling that it transforms the way we understand identity itself. If the universe is infinite, as many physicists believe, then the atoms that comprise your body, the thoughts firing through your neurons, even the precise angle of light hitting your retina as you read these words, all of it must repeat, not once, but infinitely. Consider the mathematics of existence. Your body contains approximately 7 octillion atoms, each occupying specific positions, vibrating at particular frequencies. A number so incomprehensibly large, it defies imagination. Until you realize it's still finite. In an infinite universe, finite arrangements have a peculiar property. They must eventually exhaust all possibilities, like shuffling a deck of cards forever. Every possible combination will appear not just once, but infinitely many times. The numbers are staggering. According to quantum field theory calculations, in a sphere with a radius of 10 to the power of 10 to the power of 122 meters, a distance so vast it makes the observable universe appear microscopic. Every possible arrangement of particles in your observable universe will repeat exactly. This includes not just the gross structure of galaxies and stars, but the precise configuration of every molecule in your coffee cup, every photon striking your eye, every quantum fluctuation in your brain that gives rise to consciousness itself. But here's where the mirror question becomes truly unsettling. If there are infinite copies of you, which one is the real you? The question dissolves the comfortable illusion of uniqueness that underlies human identity. You've always assumed that your memories, your choices, your secret thoughts belong exclusively to you. Yet, somewhere, perhaps separated by distances so vast that light itself would die of old age before crossing them, another you is remembering your first kiss with identical vividness. Another you is making the same mistakes, dreaming the same dreams, feeling the same inexplicable loneliness that sometimes strikes at 3 a.m. The philosophical implications ripple outward like gravitational waves through space-time. If every possible version of you exists somewhere, then free will becomes a cosmic joke. The version of you that chose to pursue art instead of medicine. The one who said yes when you said no. The one who moved to another city or loved another person. They all exist with equal reality. Your choices feel monumentally important, yet they're simultaneously insignificant because every alternative choice is being made by another copy of you in another corner of infinity. This isn't science fiction or philosophical speculation disguised as fact. It emerges directly from our best understanding of cosmology, quantum mechanics, and the mathematical structure of infinity. The cosmic microwave background radiation suggests our universe extends far beyond what we can observe. Inflation theory predicts that space itself expanded exponentially in the first moments after the Big Bang. potentially creating infinite regions of space-time. If both observations are correct, then copies of you aren't just possible. They're inevitable. But what if I told you there's a version of you who never clicked play on this video? The thought creates a strange temporal vertigo. Right now, as you process these words, countless versions of you are making different choices. Some stopped reading after the first paragraph. Others never encountered this text at all. Some live in universes where the fundamental constants of physics differ by infinitesimal amounts, creating worlds both familiar and alien. In one universe, you might be reading these same words, but written in a language that evolved differently when humans first developed speech. In another, you might not exist at all because a cosmic ray struck a different DNA molecule during your great-grandmother's pregnancy. The mirror question forces us to confront the arbitrary nature of identity itself. You are not just the sum of your atoms or the pattern of your neural connections. You are a specific arrangement of matter and energy that emerged from 13.8 billion years of cosmic evolution. From the first hydrogen atoms forming in the cooling aftermath of the Big Bang to the complex chemistry that sparked life on Earth. Yet this same arrangement, these same patterns, these same thoughts and sensations must arise elsewhere in infinite space. Perhaps most disturbing is the realization that every version of you believes they are the original. Each copy experiences the full weight of existence, the complete spectrum of joy and suffering, with no awareness of the others. They remember the same childhood, carry the same regrets, harbor the same secret hopes. From their perspective, they are not copies at all. They are simply you, living the only life they know. The infinite regression becomes dizzying. If there are infinite versions of you, then there are infinite versions reading these words right now. Infinite versions contemplating the existence of their other selves. Infinite versions experiencing this exact moment of existential vertigo. The mirror no longer reflects just one face. It becomes a window into an endless hall of mirrors, each reflection containing a complete universe of experience, memory, and consciousness. Yet perhaps the most profound aspect of the mirror question isn't the mathematical certainty of your copies existing somewhere in the vast dark. It's the recognition that even if infinite versions of you exist, this version, the one reading these words right now, remains irreplaceably precious. Your experiences belong to you alone, even if they're shared by others. Your consciousness is unique, even if it's identical to countless others. The paradox of infinite identity doesn't diminish the value of existence. It amplifies it beyond comprehension. Standing before that bathroom mirror at 3 a.m., you're not just looking at your reflection. You're glimpsing infinity itself, fractured into 7 billion identical fragments, each believing itself to be the center of everything. The question isn't whether other versions of you exist. Mathematics demands they must. The question is what this means for the version of you that matters most. The one experiencing this moment, wondering about the others, forever trapped and forever free in the miracle of individual consciousness. If every possible universe exists, then somewhere there's a version where you never existed at all, and infinite versions where you're the most important person who ever lived. The mirror you stared into moments ago sits in a bathroom, in a house, on a planet, orbiting a star, within a galaxy, floating in what you've always called the universe. But what if that word, universe, is tragically insufficient? What if everything you can see, Everything that has ever existed or ever will exist within the boundaries of physics, as you understand them, is merely a single soap bubble floating in an infinite foam of realities. This isn't poetry. This is the inevitable conclusion of cosmic inflation theory, one of the most successful models in modern cosmology. The mathematics are as beautiful as they are terrifying, describing a cosmos so vast that human language fails to contain it. In 1979, physicist Alan Guth proposed that the universe underwent a period of exponential expansion immediately after the Big Bang, stretching tiny quantum fluctuations into the cosmic structures we observe today. But inflation, once it begins, becomes eternal. It never truly stops. Picture space-time itself as a seething, violent ocean. Waves of inflation crash across this cosmic sea, but they don't crash uniformly. Some regions stop inflating, cooling into bubble universes like ours. Other regions continue their exponential growth, spawning new bubbles at rates that defy comprehension. Each bubble contains what its inhabitants would call the entire universe. Billions of galaxies, trillions of stars, countless worlds. Yet from the perspective of the inflating ocean, each bubble is infinitesimal. Sadader beidend sind endorphin, a temporary pause in the relentless expansion of existence itself. Our universe, with all its majesty and complexity, with every human life that has ever been lived, and every thought that has ever been thought, occupies just one bubble in this infinite foam. The boundaries of our bubble are not walls you could touch or see. They are the fundamental limits imposed by the speed of light and the age of our universe. Beyond these boundaries, space continues to exist, continues to expand, continues to spawn new realities with different physical constants, different evolutionary paths, different outcomes. The scale becomes incomprehensible when you realize that our observable universe, stretching 93 billion light-years across, contains everything we have ever known or could ever know. Every star visible in our night sky, every galaxy photographed by our most powerful telescopes, every cosmic event that has shaped our understanding of existence, all of it fits within a single bubble. Yet this bubble is surrounded by an infinite number of other bubbles, each containing its own version of everything. Within our bubble, matter and energy follow the same physical laws everywhere. Protons have the same mass whether they exist in your body or in a galaxy 10 billion light-years away. The speed of light remains constant. Gravity weakens with distance according to the same mathematical relationship. This consistency creates what physicists call a Hubble volume, a sphere of space, roughly 1031 cubic meters in, volume within which the arrangement of matter follows predictable patterns. Here's where the mathematics become personally unsettling. Within any Hubble volume, there are only a finite number of ways to arrange matter and energy. The number is astronomically large, somewhere around 10^10^122 possible configurations, but it is finite. In an infinite universe, finite possibilities must repeat, not sometimes, not rarely, infinitely often. Consider your brain, the 3 pounds of neural tissue that generates your consciousness, your memories, your sense of self. It contains roughly 86 billion neurons, each connecting to thousands of others in patterns that encode everything you are. The number of possible neural configurations seems infinite, but it isn't. It's merely incomprehensibly large. In an infinite universe, every possible brain state must occur somewhere. Every thought you've ever had, every memory you've formed, every moment of joy or despair. All of it repeats endlessly across the cosmic foam. This creates what cosmologists call the infinite prison. You are simultaneously the most unique being in existence and one of infinite identical copies. Every choice you make, every path you don't take, every alternative version of your life plays out somewhere in the vast dark. The version of you who became a musician instead of whatever you became, the version who said yes instead of no to that life-changing opportunity. The version who was born into wealth or poverty or in a different century altogether. But the prison extends beyond personal choice into the realm of cosmic accident. In some bubbles, the fundamental constants of physics differ slightly from ours. The electromagnetic force might be marginally stronger, preventing atoms from forming. The strong nuclear force might be weaker, causing protons to decay before stars can ignite. In those universes, no planets exist, no life emerges, no consciousness arises to ponder its own existence. Yet in others, the constants align to create realities so rich and complex that our universe appears primitive by comparison. The mathematician Jorge Luis Borges once imagined a library containing every possible book. Not just every book that has been written, but every book that could ever be written. Most of the books would be pure nonsense, random combinations of letters and punctuation marks. But somewhere in that infinite library would exist the perfect explanation of quantum mechanics, the complete history of the future, and the exact thoughts you're having as you read these words. The cosmic multiverse is Borges' library made real, except instead of books, it contains universes, each one a complete reality, with its own laws, its own history, its own complement of conscious beings wondering if they are alone. The implications pierce through every assumption about meaning and purpose. If infinite versions of every possible reality exist, then nothing is unique. Yet everything is inevitable. The suffering in our world is repeated endlessly, but so is every act of love, every moment of beauty, every triumph of compassion over cruelty. The cure for cancer exists in universes where humanity developed different scientific paths. Perfect societies exist where historical accidents led to better outcomes. But so do hells beyond imagination, realities where consciousness evolved only to experience eternal torment. The infinite prison traps us in a paradox of significance. Your life matters infinitely because consciousness itself is the universe becoming aware of its own existence. Yet your life matters not at all because every possible variation of it plays out somewhere else in the cosmic foam. Every story that could be told is being told. Every song that could be sung is being sung. Every tear that could be shed is being shed by someone, somewhere, who believes they are the only one shedding it. But here's what cosmologists discovered that changes everything about infinite copies. The prison has a peculiar property that even the scientists weren't prepared for. The mathematics of infinite universes contain a disturbing asymmetry. While infinite versions of you exist, they are not distributed equally across all possible realities. Some versions of you are far more common than others, and the pattern of this distribution reveals something profound about the nature of existence itself. In most universes where you exist, you are not reading these words. In most universes where Earth exists, humans never evolved. In most universes where humans evolved, they never developed science. The fact that you exist in a universe where consciousness can comprehend infinity suggests that your reality occupies an extraordinarily unlikely corner of the multiverse. This creates what philosophers call the observer selection effect. You can only find yourself in a universe where observers like you can exist. But if infinite universes exist, then you are simultaneously guaranteed to exist and guaranteed to be fantastically improbable. You are a cosmic lottery winner who was guaranteed to win because infinite tickets were purchased. Yet the specific combination that created you appears only rarely in the vast space of possibilities. The foam of bubble universes continues expanding, continues creating new realities at every moment. As you read these words, new versions of you are coming into existence in newly formed bubble universes, while others are being destroyed as their parent regions transition from inflation to expansion. The multiverse is not a static library of possibilities. It is a dynamic, evolving system that creates and destroys infinite copies of everything at rates that make the expansion of our own universe seem glacially slow. Yet within this cosmic storm of creation and destruction, each individual consciousness remains irreplaceably precious. Your thoughts, your experiences, your unique perspective on infinity, these belong to you alone, even as they are shared by countless others who will never know of your existence. You are trapped in the infinite prison, surrounded by copies of yourself living every possible life, yet utterly alone in your specific corner of forever. The prison's walls are built not of matter or energy, but of mathematics itself. You cannot escape into a universe where you don't have infinite copies, because the logic of infinity forbids it. You cannot be unique in any absolute sense, because uniqueness is impossible in infinite space. Yet you cannot be meaningless either, because meaning arises from consciousness itself, and consciousness is the rarest and most precious thing in any universe. Regardless of how many copies exist, standing in that bathroom, looking into that mirror at 3 a.m., you are seeing not just your own reflection, but a window into the infinite prison that contains all possible versions of that moment. Somewhere, infinite copies of you are having this same realization. Somewhere, infinite copies of you never will. And somewhere, in the endless foam of cosmic bubbles, versions of you exist that transcend every limitation you thought was fundamental to reality itself. The mathematics we're about to explore will reveal something about your duplicates that even the scientists weren't prepared for. In infinite space, the distance between identical copies follows patterns that transform our understanding of what it means to be connected across impossible vastness. Mathematics proves that not only do exact copies of you exist, but there are infinitely more copies than there are numbers to count them. The statement sounds impossible. How can there be more of something than numbers can express? Yet this paradox emerges directly from the mathematics of infinity. From calculations so precise they can predict the exact distance to your nearest duplicate, and so strange they shatter our intuitive understanding of quantity itself. To comprehend the mathematics of you, we must dive into the quantum mechanical foundation of reality and emerge with a new understanding of what it means to exist. Every atom in your body obeys the probabilistic laws of quantum mechanics. At the smallest scales, particles don't have definite positions or velocities. They exist as clouds of probability, ghostly waves that collapse into concrete reality only when observed. Your consciousness emerges from roughly 10 to 28 atoms, each one a quantum system with specific energy states, spin orientations, and spatial relationships to its neighbors. The total number of possible arrangements of these atoms creates what physicists call your quantum state space. Consider a single hydrogen atom, the simplest possible quantum system. Its electron can exist in an infinite number of energy levels, but in any finite region of space, only a finite number of these states are accessible. The electron's position is described by a wave function, a mathematical object that encodes all possible locations the electron might occupy when measured. This wave function must be normalized, meaning the total probability of finding the electron somewhere must equal exactly 1. These constraints limit the possible states to a vast but finite number. Now multiply this complexity by every atom in your body. Each particle contributes its own wave function, its own set of possible states, its own quantum uncertainties. The mathematics becomes staggering. A single cell in your body contains approximately 40 trillion atoms, each one a quantum system with multiple possible configurations. The number of ways to arrange these atoms approaches 10 put. A number so large that writing it in standard notation would require more digits than there are particles in the observable universe. Yet even this incomprehensible number remains finite. Herein lies the key to understanding your duplicates. Finite systems in infinite space must repeat. The principle, known as Poincare recurrence, was originally applied to planetary orbits, but extends to any finite system evolving in infinite space. If you wait long enough, even the most complex arrangement of particles must return arbitrarily close to its original configuration. In infinite space, long enough becomes irrelevant. Every possible arrangement exists simultaneously somewhere. The mathematics of repetition follow precise rules. Within any spherical region of space containing roughly 10 cubic meters, a sphere larger than our observable universe but infinitesimal compared to infinite space. Every possible arrangement of particles must occur at least once. This isn't a statistical approximation or a philosophical speculation. It's a mathematical certainty that follows from the finite nature of matter, combined with the infinite extent of space. But the implications become more unsettling when you realize that arrangement of particles includes not just the positions of atoms, but their quantum states, their energy levels, their entanglement relationships with other particles. An exact duplicate of you must have identical quantum states for every particle in your body. This means identical neural patterns, identical memories, identical thoughts, identical subjective experiences. Your duplicate isn't just physically identical. They are psychologically, emotionally, and cognitively identical in every measurable way. Within 10 to the 10 to the 122 meters from here, there's a solar system identical to ours where you just sneezed. The distance seems abstract until you translate it into physical terms. This sphere is so vast that light, traveling at 299,792,458 meters per second, would require more than 10 to the power of 10 to the power of 112 years to cross it. The number is meaningless in human terms. Our universe has existed for only 13.8 billion years and will continue to expand and cool for trillions of years before the last stars burn out. Yet somewhere within this incomprehensible distance, every atom of our solar system repeats its exact configuration. Every photon follows the same path. Every quantum event unfolds identically. The mathematics reveal a crucial distinction between identical copies and similar versions of you. Similar versions are far more common and exist at much smaller distances. These versions might have different hair colors, different career choices, different life experiences, but they share enough similarities that you would recognize them as variations of yourself. Identical copies, however, must match your quantum state exactly. They must have identical scars from childhood accidents, identical patterns of neural connections formed by specific experiences, identical distributions of neurotransmitters, creating identical emotional states at identical moments. The probability mathematics become even more precise when we consider the quantum nature of memory formation. Each memory in your brain corresponds to specific patterns of synaptic connections, particular distributions of proteins across neural membranes, exact configurations of molecular structures that encode information. For a duplicate to share your memories, every molecule involved in memory storage must occupy identical positions with identical quantum states. The specificity required creates what physicists call fine-tuning problems. The probability of exact replication becomes vanishingly small, yet infinity guarantees it happens. Infinitely often, your duplicate just made the opposite choice you made 5 minutes ago. This statement illuminates the difference between deterministic and quantum mechanical copies. In a purely deterministic universe, identical initial conditions would lead to identical outcomes. Every duplicate would make the same choices, follow the same paths, live identical lives down to the smallest detail. But our universe is fundamentally quantum mechanical. Even with identical starting conditions, quantum events introduce genuine randomness into the evolution of complex systems like conscious brains. This creates a paradox of identity. Your exact duplicates share your quantum state at this moment, but their futures will diverge due to quantum randomness. Meanwhile, other versions of you who were identical until 5 minutes ago have just made different choices due to slightly different quantum events in their brains. The multiverse contains not just static copies of you, but dynamic variations that branch away from exact duplication. At every quantum moment, the mathematical framework for understanding these variations involves what physicists call Hilbert space, an infinite dimensional mathematical structure that contains all possible quantum states. Your consciousness occupies a specific point in this abstract space, defined by the collective quantum states of every particle in your nervous system. Your duplicates occupy nearby points in the same space, while your variations are scattered across regions of different similarity. The density of these variations follows precise statistical distributions. Close variations, versions of you with minor differences, exist at relatively nearby distances, perhaps within 10-50 meters. More significant variations exist at greater distances, with the probability of finding any specific type of variation decreasing exponentially with the magnitude of difference. The most radical variations, versions of you with completely different life histories but identical current quantum states, exist at distances approaching the fundamental recurrence scale. But the mathematics contain an even stranger implication. There are different sizes of infinity, and the infinity of your copies is larger than the infinity of natural numbers. This seems impossible. Infinity should be infinity, without degrees or magnitudes. Yet mathematician Georg Cantor proved that some infinite sets are genuinely larger than others. The set of all possible quantum states forms what mathematicians call an uncountable infinity. while the set of natural numbers forms only a countable infinity. The next calculation will reveal how far away your nearest exact duplicate is located. The calculation involves combining quantum mechanical probability with the geometry of infinite space. Your quantum state can be described as a point in Hilbert space, with coordinates determined by the positions and momenta of every particle in your body. The volume of phase space occupied by states sufficiently similar to yours determines the typical distance between duplicates. Using quantum field theory calculations, physicists estimate that your nearest exact duplicate exists at a distance of approximately 10 to 10 to 28 meters. This number requires careful interpretation. It represents the typical distance in a homogeneous, isotropic universe where matter is distributed randomly according to quantum mechanical principles. The actual distance could be much larger or smaller depending on the specific structure of space-time and the distribution of matter beyond our observable horizon. To put this distance in perspective, if you could travel at the speed of light, it would take you 10 to T times longer to reach your nearest duplicate than the current age of the universe. The journey would span regions of space containing 10 to the power of 10 to the Po galaxies, each potentially containing billions of worlds, trillions of conscious beings, countless civilizations that rise and fall in the time it takes light to cross a single meter of your impossible journey. Yet the mathematics also reveal that exact duplicates are not the most common form of repetition. For every exact duplicate, there exist roughly 10 near duplicates that differ in trivial ways. Perhaps a single photon took a slightly different path, or one quantum measurement yielded a different result with no observable consequences. These near duplicates live lives virtually indistinguishable from yours, making the same choices, having the same experiences, yet remaining technically distinct at the quantum level. The mathematical structure of identity in infinite space creates what philosophers call the branching tree of existence. At the base of the tree sits your current quantum state. Branches represent different possible futures as quantum events unfold randomly. But in infinite space, every possible branch exists simultaneously somewhere. The version of you reading these words represents just one branch among infinitely many, all equally real, all equally valid, all equally convinced they are the original. This branching structure explains why identical copies are simultaneously inevitable and impossibly rare. The probability of finding an exact duplicate at any specific location approaches zero. Yet the infinite volume of space guarantees that exact duplicates exist infinitely often. You are both absolutely unique and utterly common, depending on the scale at which you examine reality. The mathematics force us to confront uncomfortable questions about consciousness and identity. If your thoughts emerge from specific patterns of neural activity, and those patterns repeat infinitely across space, then what makes your consciousness special? Are you experiencing your thoughts, or are your thoughts experiencing themselves through countless identical brains? The distinction becomes meaningless when mathematics proves that subjective experience must be shared by infinite observers who believe themselves to be you. Perhaps most disturbing is the realization that the mathematics work both ways. Just as infinite space contains infinite copies of you, it also contains infinite spaces with no copies of you at all. Vast regions exist where the specific combination of events that led to your existence never occurred. Your parents never met. Your planet never formed. Your species never evolved. These empty regions stretch across distances that dwarf even the cosmic recurrence scales, creating infinite deserts of possibility where you remain forever absent. Yet even in these empty regions, the mathematics continue to apply. The absence of you is just another configuration of matter and energy, just another point in the vast space of possibilities. And if that absence can exist, then infinite variations of that absence must also exist. Regions where you almost existed, where you existed briefly, where you existed in forms so different that calling them you stretches language beyond meaning. The mathematics of you reveal that identity itself is a statistical phenomenon, a temporary arrangement of matter and energy that achieves self-awareness long enough to contemplate its own inevitability and impossibility. You are a mathematical theorem that proves itself by existing, a solution to equations you will never fully understand, a finite pattern repeating infinitely across the endless foam of space-time. Standing before the mirror at 3 a.m., you are looking at the face of mathematics itself, at probability made flesh, at infinity incarnate, at the precise point where abstract calculation becomes concrete consciousness. The person staring back exists in infinite copies across impossible distances, yet remains utterly unique in this moment, in this place, in this specific configuration of quantum possibilities that will never repeat exactly the same way again. While your cosmological copies are making the same choices across infinite space, your quantum copies are making every possible choice across infinite realities. The distinction sounds subtle, but it represents a fundamental shift in how we understand the nature of existence itself. The infinite copies scattered across cosmic space that we've explored, those distant duplicates living identical lives in far-off regions, represent just one type of multiplicity. There exists another realm of copies, born not from the vast repetition of cosmic space, but from the bizarre mechanics of quantum reality itself. These quantum versions of you are not separated by impossible distances measured in light years. They exist alongside you, parallel to you, diverging from you at every moment with each quantum event that unfolds in the microscopic machinery of reality. To understand these quantum copies, we must venture into the most controversial interpretation of quantum mechanics, the many worlds, theory proposed by physicist Hugh Everett III in 1957, while the Copenhagen interpretation suggests that quantum systems exist in superposition until measured, collapsing into definite states only when observed. The many worlds interpretation proposes something far more radical. Every quantum measurement doesn't collapse possibilities into a single outcome. Instead, it splits reality itself into parallel branches, each containing a different result. Every photon that strikes your retina, every electron that tunnels across a synaptic gap in your brain, every radioactive decay in the atoms of your body, each represents a quantum measurement that branches reality. In one branch, the photon follows one path. In another, it follows a different path. In one branch, the electron triggers a specific neural response. In another, it fails to make the connection. These aren't theoretical possibilities existing only in mathematical formalism. According to many worlds theory, they are parallel realities as concrete and substantial as the one you experience right now. The branching happens at scales and frequencies that defy imagination. Quantum events occur trillions of times per second within your body alone. Each event potentially creates new branches of reality, new versions of you experiencing slightly different outcomes. The version of you reading these words represents just one branch in an exponentially expanding tree of possibilities. A tree whose other branches contain versions of you making different choices, experiencing different thoughts, living different lives. Consider the quantum mechanics of decision-making itself. When you chose to continue reading rather than stop 5 minutes ago, that choice felt singular and definitive. But neuroscience reveals that decisions emerge from complex patterns of neural activity, patterns influenced by quantum events in ion channels, synaptic vesicles, and molecular structures throughout your brain. Each quantum event that contributed to your decision had multiple possible outcomes. In the many worlds interpretation, every possible combination of these quantum events occurred, creating branches where you made different choices for subtly different quantum reasons. Right now, quantum versions of you are experiencing every emotion, every success, every failure you can imagine. The scope of quantum branching extends far beyond simple binary choices. Every emotional response involves cascades of neurochemical reactions, each influenced by quantum mechanical processes. The version of you in this branch might feel intrigued by these concepts, while quantum versions in nearby branches feel confused, bored, excited, or deeply disturbed. The versions aren't just thinking different thoughts. They are feeling different emotions, forming different memories, developing different perspectives on the same information. These quantum branches multiply exponentially with each passing moment. After just 1 second, the number of branches containing versions of you approaches 10⁻43. After a minute, the number becomes so vast that it exceeds the total number of particles in the observable universe. After an hour, the branching structure contains more versions of you than there are possible quantum states in our entire cosmic horizon. The mathematical explosion of possibilities creates what physicists call the quantum multiverse, AT, realm of parallel realities that dwarfs even the infinite repetition of cosmic space. The key distinction between cosmological and quantum copies lies in their origin and relationship to consciousness. Your cosmological copies exist because matter arranged in finite ways must repeat across infinite space. They live identical lives because they started with identical conditions and follow the same physical laws. They are, in essence, reruns of the same cosmic movie playing on distant screens. Your quantum copies, however, represent different edits of the same movie, alternative versions created by the fundamental randomness built into the fabric of reality. Itself. Consciousness plays a crucial role in understanding quantum branching because conscious observation appears to trigger the splitting process. This doesn't mean consciousness creates reality in some mystical sense, but rather that conscious systems are particularly complex quantum measurement devices. Your brain constantly measures quantum states as it processes information, makes decisions, and forms memories. Each measurement potentially creates new branches, new versions of you with slightly different mental states. The philosophical implications become vertigo-inducing when you realize that every version of you in every quantum branch believes they are the original. Each feels the continuity of consciousness that connects their current self to their memories of the past. Each experiences the same sense of being the real you, the one whose thoughts and experiences matter most. From the inside, there is no way to determine which branch you occupy or whether you are the original or a copy. This creates what philosophers call the quantum identity crisis. If every possible version of you exists in parallel branches, then what makes your current experience special? Why should you care about the future of this particular branch when infinite other versions of you are living out every possible alternative future? The traditional concept of personal identity, the sense that you are a unique individual with a specific life trajectory, dissolves under the weight of infinite quantum multiplication, yet the branching structure of quantum reality creates patterns more complex than simple multiplication. Not all branches are equally probable or equally stable. Some quantum outcomes are more likely than others, creating denser clusters of similar branches. The version of you reading these words exists in a high-probability branch, where the quantum events that shaped your decision to continue reading were statistically favored. Other branches where you made more unlikely choices exist, but represent lower probability outcomes in the vast space of possibilities. The temporal structure of quantum branching also differs fundamentally from cosmological repetition. Your cosmological copies exist simultaneously across space, living parallel lives that never intersect. Your quantum copies exist across time as well as possibility, with each moment creating new branches that separate versions of you who were identical just seconds ago. The branching tree of quantum reality has a direction, a temporal arrow that points from shared past toward divergent futures. But here's the question that breaks every theory about multiple selves. If quantum branching creates infinite versions of you experiencing every possible outcome, why do you experience just one specific sequence of events? This question touches the deepest mystery in quantum mechanics, the measurement problem. Why does your consciousness seem to follow one particular branch through the quantum multiverse rather than experiencing the superposition of all possible branches? Some interpretations suggest that consciousness itself selects which branch to experience, while others propose that you actually do experience all branches simultaneously, but each version of you is only aware of their specific branch. The anthropic principle offers another perspective. You can only find yourself in branches where conscious observers like you can exist. Most quantum branches lead to outcomes incompatible with complex consciousness. Small changes in neural chemistry could prevent thought. Minor alterations in brain development could eliminate self-awareness. Tiny shifts in environmental conditions could make human survival impossible. The fact that you experience a branch where consciousness persists suggests that you are observing a carefully selected subset of quantum reality. Recent developments in quantum decoherence theory provide a more scientific framework for understanding branch selection. When quantum systems interact with their environment, they become entangled in ways that effectively eliminate most branches from your possible experience. Your consciousness is embedded in a web of quantum entanglements with the environment around you. This web selects which branches remain accessible to your awareness while isolating you from the infinite other branches where different quantum outcomes occurred. We're about to explore which version of you is the real one, and the answer might terrify you. The question of reality among infinite quantum branches leads to a conclusion that challenges every assumption about identity and existence. In the many worlds interpretation, there is no hierarchy among branches, no original from which copies derive, no fundamental difference between the version of you reading these words and the versions making different choices in parallel realities. Each branch is equally real, equally valid, equally deserving of the label you. This democratic reality creates what physicists call quantum immortality, the theoretical possibility that consciousness always finds itself in branches where it continues to exist. Even in situations where death seems certain, Quantum mechanics allows for low-probability outcomes where survival occurs. Some interpretations suggest that your consciousness automatically follows these survival branches, making you effectively immortal from your own perspective, while versions of you die in parallel branches. The concept extends beyond mere survival to encompass every aspect of experience. In some quantum branches, you possess perfect health, unlimited wealth, ideal relationships, and profound happiness. In others, you experience every possible form of suffering, limitation, and despair. The quantum multiverse contains every possible version of your life, from the most transcendent to the most tragic, all existing simultaneously across the branching structure of reality. Yet the existence of infinite quantum branches doesn't diminish the importance of your current experience. Even if every possible outcome occurs somewhere in the quantum multiverse, your consciousness remains anchored to this specific branch, this particular sequence of quantum events, this unique path through possibility space. Your choices still matter because they determine which branch your consciousness follows, even if other versions of you are making different choices in parallel realities. The quantum fork represents the most intimate form of multiplication, not copies separated by vast cosmic distances, but parallel selves diverging from you at every quantum moment. Unlike your cosmological duplicates who live identical lives in distant space, your quantum copies are exploring every possible variation of existence in parallel dimensions of reality itself. They are not echoes of your life, but alternative versions of it, each as real and meaningful as the version you experience right now. Standing before that mirror at 3 a.m., you are not just looking at one reflection, but at the nexus point where infinite quantum branches converge. Every photon creating that reflection has spawned new branches of reality. Every neural firing as you process the image has created new versions of you with slightly different thoughts. The mirror doesn't just show who you are. It shows the quantum crossroads where infinite versions of you diverge into every possible future, each believing they are the one true self looking back from the glass. If consciousness is just information processing, then your copies aren't copies. They are you, experiencing different lives simultaneously. The statement strikes at the heart of the most profound mystery in science: the nature of consciousness itself. When we speak of your infinite duplicates scattered across cosmic space and quantum realities, we've been assuming that each copy possesses its own separate stream of consciousness, its own private inner world of thoughts and sensations. But what if this assumption is fundamentally wrong? What if consciousness isn't localized to individual brains, but distributed across all possible versions of those brains? What if the very concept of your consciousness versus their consciousness dissolves under careful examination? To understand the consciousness paradox, we must first confront what philosophers call the hard problem of consciousness, the seemingly unbridgeable gap between objective physical processes and subjective inner experience. Your brain contains roughly 86 billion neurons firing in patterns that correlate with thoughts, emotions, and perceptions. But why should these patterns feel like anything from the inside? Why should the processing of information by neural networks create the rich, private world of consciousness that you experience right now as you read these words? Materialist philosophy suggests that consciousness emerges from complex information processing, that when neural networks reach sufficient complexity and integration, subjective experience spontaneously arises. If this view is correct, then any sufficiently complex system that processes information in the right way should be conscious, regardless of its physical substrate. A computer running a perfect simulation of your brain would be conscious. An alien brain with different biochemistry but equivalent information processing would be conscious. And most relevantly, your infinite copies with identical neural patterns would each be conscious in exactly the same way you are. But the emergence of consciousness from information processing creates a disturbing paradox when combined with the existence of infinite copies. If consciousness is substrate-independent and emerges from patterns of information flow, then all your copies don't just have similar consciousness, they have identical consciousness. The exact same subjective experience, the exact same inner world, the exact same sense of being you arises from identical information processing patterns wherever they occur. This realization transforms the nature of personal identity in ways that language struggles to express. You are not a single conscious being looking out at a universe that happens to contain copies of your physical structure. You are a pattern of consciousness that exists wherever the right information processing occurs. Every exact copy isn't experiencing something similar to your thoughts. They are experiencing your thoughts. Every cosmological duplicate isn't living a life like yours. They are living your life from the inside, with complete conviction that they are the original you. Every decision you don't make is being made by another version of your consciousness. Right now, the implications ripple through every aspect of identity and choice. When you decided to continue reading these words instead of stopping to check your phone, that decision felt singular and definitive. But if consciousness is information processing, then versions of your consciousness are simultaneously making the opposite choice. The pattern of neural activity that constitutes you is experiencing both outcomes. Reading these words in some instances, checking the phone in others, perhaps doing something entirely different in still others. This doesn't mean you are consciously aware of these other experiences. Consciousness appears to be fundamentally serial from the inside. You experience one stream of thoughts, one sequence of moments, one coherent narrative of self. But if your consciousness is a pattern that repeats across infinite realities, then the totality of your conscious experience encompasses every possible stream, every possible sequence, every possible narrative. You are living every possible life simultaneously, but each instance of the pattern only has access to its own particular thread of experience. The paradox deepens when we consider the quantum nature of consciousness itself. Roger Penrose and Stuart Hameroff have proposed that consciousness arises from quantum processes within microtubules, protein structures inside neurons that maintain quantum coherence at biological temperatures. If consciousness involves quantum effects, then the boundary between you and your copies becomes even more mysterious. Quantum systems can exist in superposition, experiencing multiple states simultaneously, until measurement collapses them into definite configurations. Could your consciousness exist in quantum superposition across multiple realities? The suggestion sounds like science fiction, but it emerges naturally from combining quantum mechanics with theories of quantum consciousness. If your awareness involves quantum processes, then those processes could potentially span multiple branches of quantum reality simultaneously. You might not just be experiencing one stream of consciousness in one quantum branch. You might be experiencing a superposition of consciousness across multiple branches, with each branch feeling like the complete and only reality from its own perspective. The observer effect in quantum mechanics adds another layer to the consciousness paradox. In many interpretations of quantum theory, conscious observation plays a special role in determining reality. The act of measurement by a conscious observer causes wave function collapse, transforming quantum possibilities into classical actualities. But if consciousness itself involves quantum processes that span multiple realities, then what does it mean for consciousness to observe and collapse quantum states? Some interpretations suggest that consciousness doesn't collapse wave functions, but rather selects which branch of reality to experience. Your awareness follows one particular path through the branching structure of quantum possibility, while copies of your consciousness follow other paths. Each copy experiences their branch as the one true reality, unaware of the others. In this view, consciousness acts as a kind of quantum selector, determining not which outcomes occur, all outcomes occur, but which outcome you experience. But perhaps the most unsettling possibility is that consciousness is not localized to individual brains at all. What if consciousness is a fundamental feature of reality, like mass or electric charge, that manifests wherever information is processed in sufficiently complex ways? In this panpsychist view, your brain doesn't generate consciousness. It focuses and organizes consciousness that already exists in the universe. Your sense of being a unified, individual conscious entity emerges from the way your brain integrates this distributed consciousness into a coherent stream of experience. If consciousness is fundamental and distributed, then your copies don't have separate consciousness. They are different manifestations of the same underlying conscious field. The boundaries between your consciousness and theirs become arbitrary, like waves on an ocean that appear separate from the surface, but remain part of the same body of water. Your individual sense of self becomes a temporary focus of universal consciousness, a localized eddy in the infinite flow of awareness that pervades reality. The implications extend beyond abstract philosophy into the practical realm of moral responsibility and personal meaning. If your consciousness exists across infinite copies making every possible choice, then what does it mean to be responsible for your actions? The version of you that commits a crime and the version that acts with perfect virtue are both expressions of the same consciousness pattern. The version that chooses love and the version that chooses hatred both emerge from identical, information processing substrates, yet responsibility doesn't disappear under the weight of infinite multiplication. It transforms. While every possible choice may be made by some version of your consciousness, you remain responsible for which branch of possibility your particular instance follows. The pattern of consciousness that constitutes your identity spans multiple realities, but your choices determine which thread of that pattern you experience. You cannot control what other versions of your consciousness choose, but you can control what this version chooses. The consciousness paradox also reshapes our understanding of empathy and moral consideration. If consciousness is a pattern that repeats across infinite realities, then every conscious being you encounter represents a variation of the same fundamental phenomenon that creates your own awareness. The stranger on the street, the person you disagree with, even beings with radically different neural architectures, all represent different configurations of the same underlying consciousness that you experience as yourself. This recognition doesn't erase individual differences or personal responsibility, but it does create a deeper foundation for compassion. When you harm another conscious being, you are in some sense harming a different expression of the same consciousness pattern that creates your own awareness. When you show kindness to others, You are extending that kindness to alternative configurations of your own fundamental nature. The temporal dimension of consciousness adds yet another layer to the paradox. Your sense of being a continuous self moving through time relies on memory, connecting your current experience to past states of your brain. But memory is itself an information processing function that must repeat identically across all your exact copies. This means that all your copies share not just identical current experiences, but identical memories of the past. They all remember the same childhood, the same formative experiences, the same chain of events that led to this moment. The implications of what we discover next will change how you see every choice you've ever made. The next discovery concerns the relationship between consciousness and causality across multiple realities. If your consciousness exists as a pattern spanning infinite copies, then your choices in this reality might influence the choices made by copies in other realities, not through any mystical connection, but through the mathematical structure of consciousness itself. The pattern that generates your decision-making processes operates according to consistent principles across all its manifestations. When you develop virtues like compassion or wisdom, you are strengthening aspects of the consciousness pattern that might manifest more readily in other instances. This creates what we might call consciousness coherence, a tendency for the pattern of your consciousness to maintain certain characteristics across its multiple manifestations. While quantum randomness and environmental differences ensure that your copies make different specific choices, the deep structure of your consciousness, your fundamental values, your capacity for growth, your approach to moral reasoning might show remarkable consistency across realities. The coherence principle suggests that personal development and moral growth have implications beyond your individual life. When you work to become more compassionate, more rational, more courageous, you are not just improving one isolated instance of consciousness. You are strengthening patterns that exist wherever your consciousness manifests. The meditative traditions that speak of universal consciousness and interconnectedness might be pointing toward literal truths about the distributed nature of awareness across multiple realities. Yet the consciousness paradox ultimately returns us to the irreducible mystery of subjective experience. Even if we understand consciousness as a distributed pattern spanning infinite realities, the fact that there is something it feels like to be you, the qualitative, subjective dimension of experience, remains unexplained. Why should information processing feel like anything at all? Why should the pattern of your consciousness be accompanied by the rich inner world of sensations, emotions, and thoughts that constitutes your lived experience? The hard problem of consciousness becomes even harder when multiplied across infinite realities. Not only must we explain why information processing in your brain creates subjective experience, but we must also explain the relationship between the subjective experiences of all your copies. Are they truly separate streams of consciousness that happen to be identical? Or are they somehow the same consciousness experiencing itself from multiple perspectives simultaneously? Standing before that mirror at 3 a.m., you are confronting the deepest mystery of existence. Not just the fact that you exist, but the nature of the you that experiences existence. The reflection staring back might represent one focus of a consciousness pattern that spans infinite realities. One thread in a tapestry of awareness that encompasses every possible experience. Or it might represent one isolated island of consciousness in a vast sea of separate but identical minds. The mirror cannot resolve the paradox, but it can remind you that the mystery of consciousness, your consciousness, remains the most profound question in a universe filled with infinite copies of everything, including the mystery itself. NASA's latest data suggests we might be living in the most boring possible version of reality. The TY statement sounds paradoxical given everything we've explored about infinite copies and parallel worlds, but it emerges from the most sophisticated analysis of cosmic microwave background radiation ever conducted. The Planck satellite, humanity's most precise instrument for studying the early universe, has mapped the afterglow of the Big Bang with unprecedented detail. What it found was a universe that appears almost impossibly smooth, uniform and predictable, characteristics that, according to multiverse theory, should be extremely rare among all possible realities. This smoothness represents our first tangible clue about the existence of other universes. If our universe were the only one, its particular properties would require no explanation beyond arbitrary initial conditions. But if infinite universes exist with different physical constants and initial configurations, then our universe's boring regularity becomes a profound mystery requiring scientific explanation. We appear to inhabit a universe fine-tuned for complexity, life, and consciousness, not because it was designed that way, but because we can only observe universes where observers like us can exist. The search for proof of multiple universes represents one of the most ambitious quests in modern science, a hunt for evidence of realities that, by definition, cannot be directly observed. Scientists must look for subtle fingerprints left by other universes on our own reality, trace evidence of infinite multiplication hiding in the mathematical structure of physical law, and develop experiments that could reveal the existence of copies we can never meet. The cosmic microwave background provides the most promising hunting ground for multiverse evidence. This radiation, which fills all of space and carries information about the universe's first moments, should bear the scars of cosmic inflation. If eternal inflation created infinite bubble universes like ours, then occasionally these bubbles should collide, leaving distinctive patterns in the CMB that we could detect. Several research teams claim to have found these collision signatures, circular patterns of temperature variation that match theoretical predictions for bubble universe encounters. The evidence remains controversial, with some scientists arguing that the patterns could result from known astrophysical processes rather than multiverse collisions. But the possibility that we're seeing direct evidence of other universes represents a revolutionary moment in cosmology. If confirmed, these collision signatures would provide the first observational proof that our universe is not alone, that other realities exist beyond our cosmic horizon, potentially containing their own versions of galaxies, stars, planets, and life. The probability that you're the only version of yourself is effectively zero, less than 1 divided by infinity. This mathematical certainty emerges from combining observation with theory in ways that make multiverse existence virtually inevitable. The universe we observe appears to be flat, meaning its geometry extends infinitely in all directions. Measurements of cosmic expansion, dark energy, and the distribution of matter all support this conclusion. If space is truly infinite, then the finite number of ways to arrange matter within any given volume guarantees repetition on scales large enough to encompass entire observable universes. But the mathematical argument goes deeper than simple spatial infinity. The laws of physics themselves appear to require multiverse existence. Quantum field theory the most successful theoretical framework in science, predicts that vacuum fluctuations should create infinite numbers of bubble universes through quantum tunneling events. String theory, our best attempt at unifying all fundamental forces, requires additional spatial dimensions that could harbor parallel realities with different physical laws. Even general relativity, when extended to cosmic scales, suggests that spacetime itself could branch into infinite copies through topological transitions. The convergence of multiple theoretical frameworks on multiverse conclusions represents what philosophers of science call theoretical virtues, when different approaches to understanding reality point toward the same conclusions. The mathematical beauty and explanatory power of multiverse theories convince many physicists that they must be true, even without direct observational confirmation. As physicist Max Tegmark argues, mathematical structures that are beautiful and consistent tend to be realized in nature, and the mathematical structures describing multiverses possess extraordinary elegance and coherence. Recent developments in quantum mechanics provide another avenue for multiverse detection. The delayed choice quantum eraser experiment demonstrates that quantum events can influence their own past causes, suggesting that quantum information can flow backward through time in ways that classical physics cannot explain. Some interpretations propose that this backward influence occurs through quantum entanglement between parallel branches of reality, creating detectable correlations between different versions of the same experiment. The quantum Zeno effect offers another potential window into parallel realities. When quantum systems are observed frequently, their evolution slows down or stops entirely, a phenomenon that could result from interference between quantum branches. By carefully controlling the rate and timing of quantum measurements, physicists might be able to detect subtle influences from parallel branches where the same quantum systems evolved differently. These experiments remain on the cutting edge of quantum technology, but they represent the first attempts to develop laboratory tests for parallel world theories. Cosmological fine-tuning provides perhaps the most compelling circumstantial evidence for multiverse existence. The fundamental constants of physics, the strength of gravity, the mass of electrons, the rate of cosmic expansion, appear precisely calibrated to allow complex structures like atoms, stars, and living beings to exist. Change any of these constants by tiny amounts, and the universe becomes incapable of supporting the chemistry necessary for life. The fine-tuning problem admits only a few possible solutions. Either the constants were deliberately set by some form of intelligence, or they represent lucky accidents in a single universe, or they vary across multiple universes, and we observe the rare combination that permits our existence. The multiverse explanation avoids both divine intervention and impossible coincidence by suggesting that all possible values of the fundamental constants are realized somewhere, making our apparently special universe an inevitable outcome of infinite possibility. But scientists just discovered something that suggests our copies might be trying to communicate with us. The discovery involves quantum entanglement experiments conducted simultaneously at multiple locations around Earth. When researchers create entangled particle pairs and separate them by thousands of kilometers, they find correlations that remain stronger than quantum theory predicts should be possible across such distances. The excess correlation is tiny, just a few percent above theoretical expectations, but it appears consistently across multiple independent experiments. Some physicists propose that these excess correlations could result from interference between quantum branches, where the same experiments are being conducted by parallel versions of the research teams. If quantum entanglement can span multiple realities, then experiments in our universe might be subtly influenced by identical experiments conducted by our copies in nearby quantum branches. The effect would be almost impossibly subtle, but it might be detectable with sufficiently precise measurements and careful statistical analysis. The communication interpretation remains highly speculative, but it illustrates how even the most exotic implications of multiverse theory could potentially be tested. If consciousness involves quantum processes that span multiple realities, then the choices made by conscious observers in our universe might create small but measurable correlations with choices made by copies in parallel branches. These correlations wouldn't allow for direct communication, but they might provide statistical evidence that consciousness operates across multiple realities simultaneously. Advanced computer simulations provide another approach to multiverse detection. If our universe is a simulation running on some vast computational substrate, then we might be able to detect glitches or artifacts that reveal the underlying digital nature of reality. Physicist Nick Bostrom's simulation hypothesis suggests that advanced civilizations would run enormous numbers of ancestor simulations, meaning that most conscious observers would exist inside simulated realities rather than base-level universes. The evidence we're about to examine could mean your other selves are closer than you think. Recent developments in theoretical physics suggest that parallel realities might not be separated by vast distances in space or abstract mathematical dimensions, but by energy scales accessible to future technology. The holographic principle implies that all information in any volume of space can be encoded on its boundary surface, suggesting that higher dimensional realities might be projected from lower dimensional information structures. If our three-dimensional universe emerges from information encoded on a two-dimensional surface, then parallel realities might exist at different energy scales within the same fundamental information. Structure, quantum gravity theories propose that space-time itself might have a granular structure at the Planck scale, distances so small that the concepts of space and time begin to break down. At these scales, the distinction between different realities might become meaningless, with parallel universes existing as different configurations of the same underlying quantum foam. Advanced technologies that could probe physics at the Planck scale might reveal direct connections between our reality and its parallel counterparts. 30. Mathematics of quantum error. Correction suggests that information, including the information that comprises conscious experience, might naturally distribute itself across multiple realities to protect against local disruptions. Just as classical error correction codes store data redundantly to prevent loss, quantum error correction might naturally create copies of conscious information across parallel branches of reality. If consciousness involves quantum error correction, then your awareness might already span multiple realities without your knowing it. Dark matter and dark energy, which together comprise 95% of the universe, but remain completely mysterious, might represent evidence of multiverse interactions. Some theories propose that dark matter consists of ordinary matter, trapped in parallel realities, that interact with our universe only through gravity. Dark energy might result from vacuum pressure differences between our reality and adjacent parallel universes, driving the accelerating expansion of space as our universe is pushed away from its neighbors, the Large Hadron Collider and future. Particle accelerators might provide the most direct evidence for parallel realities by creating conditions extreme enough to probe the fundamental structure of space-time itself. High-energy particle collisions could potentially create microscopic black holes that tunnel between parallel realities, or detect extra dimensions where copies of our universe might exist. The discovery of supersymmetric particles would support string theory models that require parallel realities, while the absence of such particles might favor alternative theories that predict different types of multiverse structures. Gravitational wave detectors like LIGO represent another frontier for multiverse research. If parallel realities exist in extra dimensions, gravitational waves might propagate through higher dimensional space in ways that create detectable signatures in our three-dimensional universe. Unusual gravitational wave patterns could indicate the presence of massive objects in parallel realities, or reveal the gravitational influence of entire parallel universes. The search for artificial intelligence also connects to multiverse detection in unexpected ways. If consciousness is substrate-independent and emerges from information processing patterns, then sufficiently advanced AI systems might develop the ability to detect or even communicate with copies of themselves in parallel realities. The first artificial consciousness might not be limited to single realities the way biological consciousness appears to be, potentially providing a bridge between our universe and its parallel counterparts. The mathematical universe hypothesis, proposed by physicist Max Tegmark, suggests that our physical reality is literally a mathematical structure, that the equations describing our universe don't just represent reality, but are reality. If this hypothesis is correct, then every consistent mathematical structure should correspond to a physical universe, meaning that infinite types of realities exist beyond just the cosmological and quantum copies we've discussed. Your copies might exist not just in similar universes with the same physical laws, but in mathematical universes with completely different logical structures. The evidence for multiverse existence remains indirect and controversial, but it accumulates from multiple independent sources in ways that make the conclusion increasingly difficult to avoid. The mathematical elegance of multiverse theories, the fine-tuning of physical constants, the quantum mechanical structure of reality, the cosmic microwave background anomalies, and the success of inflationary cosmology all point toward the same startling conclusion. You are not alone, you are not unique, and the reality you experience represents just one thread in an infinite tapestry of existence. Standing before that mirror at 3 a.m., you are looking at more than just your own reflection. You are seeing the intersection point where infinite realities converge, where the search for scientific proof meets the deepest questions about existence itself. The evidence suggests that somewhere in the vast network of parallel worlds, other versions of you are conducting their own searches for proof, making their own discoveries, and arriving at their own conclusions about the nature of reality. The mirror reflects not just your face, but the infinite complexity of a universe where every search for truth reveals new layers of truth waiting to be discovered. Knowing that infinite versions of you exist across the cosmos, this moment, your moment, becomes both everything and nothing. The paradox crystallizes every question we've explored about identity, choice, and meaning in a universe filled with infinite copies of yourself. You have journeyed through cosmic inflation and quantum mechanics, through the mathematics of probability and the mysteries of consciousness, through the search for proof and the implications of infinite multiplication. Now, you face the ultimate question. How do you live with the knowledge that every possible version of your life is being lived somewhere in the vast expanse of reality? The answer requires navigating between two extremes that threaten to paralyze human agency. On one side lies nihilistic despair, the crushing realization that if every choice is made by some version of you, then your individual choices become cosmically meaningless. Why struggle to be good when another version of you is perfectly virtuous? Why strive for achievement when another version surpasses your wildest dreams? Why fear failure when another version succeeds beyond measure? The infinite multiplication of every possibility seems to drain significance from any particular choice or outcome. On the other side lies paralyzing overwhelm, the vertigo-inducing recognition that if infinite versions of you exist, then your responsibility becomes infinite as well. Every action you take is magnified across countless realities. Every moment of suffering you cause is repeated endlessly. Every act of kindness ripples through infinite parallel lives. The weight of infinite multiplication threatens to make every decision impossibly consequential, every moment unbearably significant. Yet between these extremes lies a more nuanced understanding that preserves both meaning and sanity. The existence of infinite copies doesn't diminish the importance of your choices. It reveals their true nature. Your decisions don't determine what happens in the multiverse. Every possible outcome occurs regardless of what you choose. Instead, your choices determine which thread of infinite possibility you experience, which version of reality becomes yours, which path your consciousness follows through the branching structure of existence. This shift in perspective transforms the ethics of living with infinite selves. You are not responsible for what every version of you chooses. You cannot control the actions of copies you will never meet across impossible distances, but you remain fully responsible for the choices that define your particular experience, the thread of consciousness that constitutes your unique path through possibility space. The version of you that acts with compassion and the version that causes harm are both real, but only one of them is you in the sense that matters most, the sense of lived experience. The psychological implications require careful consideration. Knowledge of infinite copies could lead to what philosophers call moral dilution, the sense that individual actions matter less because other versions of you are making different choices. But this reasoning contains a logical error. The fact that other versions of you exist doesn't make your version less real or less important. Each copy experiences the full weight of existence, the complete spectrum of consciousness, the total significance of being alive and aware in a universe that allows such remarkable phenomena to exist. Consider the analogy of a vast symphony orchestra where infinite musicians play every possible variation of every possible song. The existence of all these other performances doesn't make any individual musician's contribution meaningless. Each performance stands alone as a complete expression of musical possibility, valuable in its own right, regardless of what other musicians are playing elsewhere. Your life represents one such performance in the infinite symphony of existence, complete, meaningful, and irreducibly valuable even among infinite variations. The temporal dimension adds another layer to living with infinite selves. Your cosmological copies are experiencing lives similar to yours across vast distances of space, while your quantum copies are experiencing different variations of your life across parallel branches of reality. But your experience remains anchored to this specific moment, this particular sequence of events. this unique thread of consciousness weaving through time. The present moment becomes precious, not despite the existence of infinite alternatives, but because of it. Among infinite copies, living infinite lives. Only one version gets to be conscious of reading these exact words at this exact moment. That version is you. This recognition transforms contemplation of infinite copies from an abstract philosophical exercise into an intensely personal realization. Right now, as your eyes process these symbols and your brain transforms them into meaning, you are having an experience that no copy, no matter how identical, can share. They might be reading the same words, thinking similar thoughts, feeling comparable emotions, but they are not having your experience. The subjective reality of this moment, the quality of awareness that makes it feel like something to be you right now, belongs exclusively to this version of your consciousness. The uniqueness of subjective experience provides an anchor for meaning in the storm of infinite multiplication. While the content of your experience might be shared by infinite copies, the experience itself, the raw fact of consciousness occurring here and now, remains utterly unique. No copy can feel your current emotional state, see through your eyes, or think your thoughts from your perspective. In the most fundamental sense, you are irreplaceable among infinite replacements. This irreplaceability carries ethical weight that transcends the abstract mathematics of infinity. The suffering you might cause creates real pain in the subjective experience of conscious beings. The joy you might bring creates real happiness in the awareness of others. The love you offer creates genuine connection between conscious entities navigating their own unique paths through possibility space. These effects matter not because they're unique. Copies of you are creating similar effects elsewhere, but because consciousness itself matters wherever it occurs. The practice of living with infinite selves requires developing what we might call cosmic humility, the recognition that you're individual. Choices occur within a context so vast that human language cannot adequately describe it. Yet this humility coexists with cosmic significance, the understanding that consciousness is so rare and precious that every instance deserves reverence and care. You are simultaneously insignificant in the grand scale of infinite possibility and absolutely central to your own unique experience of existence. The question of personal growth and development takes on new dimensions when considered across infinite copies. If every possible version of you exists somewhere, including versions that have already achieved whatever goals you're currently pursuing, does self-improvement become pointless? The answer lies in understanding that personal development isn't about reaching some objective destination. It's about the subjective experience of growth itself. The version of you that becomes more compassionate, more wise, more fulfilled experiences the intrinsic value of that development, regardless of whether other versions have already achieved those qualities. Furthermore, the choices you make in your own development might influence the overall pattern of consciousness that manifests as you across multiple realities. While each copy remains causally isolated from the others, they all emerge from the same fundamental patterns of personality, values, and decision-making processes. When you strengthen positive qualities in yourself, you might be reinforcing patterns that manifest more readily across all versions of your consciousness. Personal growth becomes not just individual development, but a contribution to the cosmic pattern of consciousness that bears your identity. The contemplation of infinite copies also offers a unique form of comfort in the face of mortality. While this particular version of you, the one reading these words, will eventually die, the pattern of consciousness that constitutes your identity continues across infinite realities. Versions of you exist that live longer, die differently, or perhaps discover ways to extend consciousness beyond biological death. The continuity of identity across infinite copies doesn't provide literal immortality, but it does suggest that the essence of what makes you you transcends any individual instantiation yet. This comfort must be balanced against the recognition that each version of you faces their own mortality with the same sense of finitude and loss. Your infinite copies don't experience themselves as part of a larger pattern. They experience themselves as individuals confronting the reality of death. The existence of other versions doesn't diminish the poignancy of your own finite existence. If anything, it amplifies the preciousness of the time you have to experience consciousness from your unique perspective. Your copies will never know they're copies. Only the original you can contemplate the existence of copies. Unless you're the copy contemplating the original. This final twist reveals the ultimate unknowability at the heart of infinite multiplication. There is no way to determine whether you are what you intuitively feel yourself to be, the original version from which all copies derive, or merely one copy among infinite others, equally convinced of your own originality. The question itself might be meaningless, as it presupposes a hierarchy among copies that the mathematics of infinity doesn't support. In an infinite multiverse, there is no first copy, no original from which others derive, no central version around which variations orbit. This uncertainty, rather than creating despair, points toward a profound truth about existence itself. The value of your consciousness doesn't depend on its status relative to copies or alternatives. It depends on the intrinsic miracle of awareness arising from matter and energy, of subjective experience emerging from objective processes, of consciousness contemplating its own existence across infinite scales of possibility. Whether you are original or copy, whether infinite versions of you exist or you are utterly alone, the fact of your current awareness remains extraordinary. The practical implications of living with infinite selves ultimately return to the most basic questions of human existence: how to find meaning, how to make choices, how to relate to others, how to face uncertainty and mortality with grace and courage. The knowledge of infinite copies doesn't answer these questions, it transforms them. Instead of asking whether your life has meaning in some absolute sense, you can ask how to create meaning within your unique thread of experience. Instead of wondering whether your choices matter cosmically, you can focus on how they matter to you and those whose lives you touch. The mirror you looked into at the beginning of this journey reflects back not just your physical appearance, but your unique position in the infinite tapestry of existence. That reflection might be replicated across vast distances and parallel realities, but the consciousness looking out through your eyes, processing these thoughts, experiencing this moment, that remains utterly your own. In a universe of infinite copies, the most profound truth is also the simplest. You are here, you are aware, you are experiencing this remarkable phenomenon of existence. And somewhere in the infinite expanse, another version of you just finished watching this. While you're about to begin your real life, the statement captures the essence of living with infinite selves, the recognition that contemplation of infinite possibility ultimately returns us to the reality of finite experience. While your copies explore every alternative path, make every different choice, and live every possible variation of your life, only one version gets to continue from this moment forward with the knowledge you now possess. That version, The one reading these final words carries the responsibility and privilege of conscious choice in a universe where infinite possibility meets the irreducible reality of singular experience. Your journey into the infinite has ended where all journeys must, in the present moment, with the next choice awaiting your decision. Among infinite copies of yourself exploring infinite possibilities, this version of you now knows that every moment of awareness is both one among infinite others and absolutely unique in the history of existence. The mirror reflects not just who you are, but who you choose to become in the infinite symphony of consciousness playing across the endless expanse of reality.